Bismillah, this is Muhammad Alshareef with part 3 of our Khutbah preparation prompts. Okay, now we're on to some speaking points. So earlier we spoke about the question that you're trying to solve, that's oozingly exciting for your audience. Well, now we're looking at answering that question. Sometimes it's even good if you answer with point form. So you tell the people, well, they answer that question, how women can get more involved in the community or how men can, treat their wives better. You want to tell them that A, B, C, these are the ways that they can do it, and here's the proof for that. And preferably if those proofs are from the Quran and Sunnah. So, for example, if you're telling men that they need to fulfill their trust to women, then you tell them, well, the reason that you need to do that is because the Quran speaks about fulfilling the trusts. And then when you give a specific example, you'd say, well, you can treat your wife better by giving her a gift. And then you quote the hadith that says, give gifts and you'll love one another. Okay, so now you're answering the question and at the same time you're also giving proofs. Sounds good? If you have any statistics or hard numbers, they don't necessarily have to be like Islamic statistics. You could say, the divorce rates in the community, or the number of kids that are dropping out of high school, etc., etc. If you get some hard numbers and statistics, it shows your audience that you've come well prepared, and the statistics have they have a place in a speech that kind of like lays a foundation that what you're talking about has proof. And the other point that you want to bring up is, what's the counter argument to your answer? So if I'm telling people that, for example, the material world, they need to stay away from the material world and not be tricked by the material world, well, the counter argument is that there were some companions that were very wealthy, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does command us to cultivate the material world that we're living in. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. So if you mention that in your speech, it leaves no room for somebody to argue with you, because you've actually brought up the counter argument yourself. Okay, the next thing you want to look at is, what are like 2 to 5 verses of Quran that relate to this enhanced question? So if we're talking about men and women, what are verses that speak about marriage, for example? Now, what's the main lesson that your audience should learn from each verse? Something interesting, when people quote Quran, sometimes they read the translation right out of the translation book, and it doesn't sound so good. I think it's better that you understand what the translation is saying and you say it and you explain it. Lift your head off the paper and look at the audience and explain what this verse is saying. And I would actually recommend that you tell people what the lesson is from this verse before you actually quote the verse. So if you tell people, for example, we should fulfill our trusts, and then you quote the verse that says Allah commands you to fulfill your trust, it sounds like much stronger. Okay, and then the next point is, what are 2 to 5 hadith related to your enhanced question? The reason that I tell you to get up to 5 hadith and 5 verses is because if you only aim for 2, you might get verses or hadith that are not necessarily related to your speech. So it's better to push yourself to get more proof, inshallah ta'ala. And then you got the next section, are there any stories from the life of the Prophet ﷺ that sheds light on the answer to this? How about stories from the companion or quotes? That's awesome. I know a lot of people, something that'll mess up your speech is if you're quoting, for example, like Shakespeare in the middle of a speech and you're like, Dale Carnegie once said. Like, who cares about Dale Carnegie, right? But if you say Ali radiallahu anhu said such and such, or Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said such, like, it has more weight, especially to a Muslim audience. And if there's any cool quotes in general relating to the question, and then that's when you can get in your Dale Carnegie quotes or whatever. To not mess up the speech, I would actually recommend that you don't quote who that person is. You just say, like, as someone said. Right? If you're talking to a Muslim audience, in some areas, sometimes, quoting one of these Dale Carnegie names, it might have some prestige. It depends on, the setting and who you're speaking to, inshallah ta'ala. And there's a last point where we start talking about personal stories and fiqh issues. Inshallah ta'ala, I'll do that in the next video. This is Muhammad Alshareef saying Assalamu alaikum with khutbah preparation prompts, and I'll see you in the next video.